Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Libawit Lily Gurma. I'm the founder of Tourism Lens, travel and tourism news reporter. Thank you for being here. Viewpoint is a place where I will discuss thorny, interesting issues in sustainable tourism. Part of it is going to be just me sounding off for a very short period of time on video and only available to newsletter subscribers. My newsletter is currently free, so you want to sign up at tourismlens.com. The other part of Viewpoint will be, just like today, a one-on-one interview with a fascinating, engaging person who works in the sustainable tourism space around the world. They're here to share with us their views about the destinations that they know and the work that they're doing, and leaving us with lots of lessons and insights for all consumers and industry. So thanks for being here. Hit that subscribe button wherever it is on YouTube, join, and also sign up for my newsletter. All right, let's welcome our first guest, Tenisha Brown-Williams. This woman, it would be an understatement to say that she's an expert in sustainable tourism in the Caribbean and in Trinidad and Tobago, but we're gonna let her tell us in her own words. So let's welcome her, shall we? Hi, Tenisha. It's so nice to have you here in Tourism Lens. Thank you so much for joining to talk to us about Trinidad and Tobago and sustainability in the tourism industry there. Welcome.
Thank you, Lily, and thanks for having me.
Sure. So I want to jump right in and talk about the work that you're doing in getting hotels in Trinidad and Tobago on a sustainability path, because you are the director of the Green Key program in Trinidad and Tobago. So tell us a little bit about what that means and how difficult is this process of greening tourism there?
Sure. So I am the director responsible for the Green Key program as part of the environmental NGO, Green TNT. And we are the national operators for Blue Flag and Green Key, which is administered or owned by the Foundation for Environmental Education out of Denmark.
And so there are set criteria for these hotels to follow. How difficult has it been? Can you tell us, for example, I know that one of them is Adventure Eco Villas. Tell us a little bit about that property and what are some of the challenges that you come across?
Yeah, sure. So just to emphasize that the criteria consist of 13 categories. So it's 13 categories of criteria that applicants have to meet in going through the eco certification. But I need to also pinpoint that the criteria is broken up into two. It's imperative criteria and guideline criteria. Okay. So when someone applies for the first time, for example, they meet all of the imperative criteria. But the beauty of Green Key is that the guideline criteria you meet incrementally over a set period. So Green Key, in other words, recognizes that sustainability is not a sprint, it's a process. And I can go on about the beauty of that because it does not jack you up against a wall to be sustainable. So that's one of the challenges that we have in trying to convince properties to get certified or operators. There's this perception that the eco-label is unattainable, that it's expensive, that it's an onerous process, and that they have to put out, as I said, a lot of money to become certified.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I was going to ask you. I think that's often the case, that even some of us who are in the media think that that's the case. So can you explain, like, how much funding does it take, more or less, or who's funding this? And how are you beating this perception and persuading hotels, etc., in joining? That's got to be difficult.
Yeah, so we are actually, or have implemented a model that came out of Puerto Rico a few years ago. With the former tourism authority, we started a co-management agreement for the implementation of Blue Flag. That's a model that works for the Caribbean simply because if you have the backing of the tourism authority, stakeholders are a lot more open to the programs. Additionally, a co-management agreement means that the tourism authority is funding the program. So it
okay.
eliminates the applicants or the stakeholders having to put out certification fees, which, as I know for other programs, are quite expensive.
Okay.
So this is the model that we're actually using in Tobago at the moment. So since 2018 into 2019, we have been co-partners with the Tobago Tourism Agency Limited for the implementation of both Blue Flag and Green Key. At the moment, Green Key is the only program that is really active, and they have engaged us through a contract, so we're paid through as part of that co-management agreement to approach the stakeholders and to get them on board.
Okay. That's fantastic. So, but like, what are some of the, other than the misperceptions, how do you think it's going overall? Would you like to get more properties on board? Are you facing more resistance, less resistance? How is that going?
Yeah, so great question. I wanna categorize the stakeholders that we deal with.
Okay.
So we deal with those who are interested in sustainability matters, but lack knowledge and lack understanding. And then we deal with those that have some sort of understanding, but it's probably, if I were to put it on a spectrum of sustainability from light green to dark green, they're perhaps in the middle of the spectrum. And then, of course, we have those who are closer to the dark green end of sustainability. Their knowledge is vast. And so those are the persons that we're dealing with. But for the most part, the stakeholders that we're dealing with really lies on the lower end of the spectrum. So we find in our interactions with stakeholders that we have to educate, we have to inform, we have to also help them to not engage in greenwashing and understanding that green certification and sustainability goes beyond just changing out all of your light bulbs to LED, or
it's less often, and
yeah. So we also have to combat those issues that you need to do more than the basics.
Do you think that consumers are more interested in traveling to the Caribbean more sustainably and choosing a hotel that's perhaps Green Key certified?
So we don't have the data to indicate that. And I'm happy that you raised that, because on my many hats that I wear, I'm also part of the University of the West Indies at St. Augustine campus.
Right.
And we are embarking on a research collaboration with FEE, the international body for Green Key, and with Green TNT to do some research on the impact of sustainability certifications in the Caribbean, specifically looking at Green Key. We're also, as part of that research, we're looking at the visitors' willingness or their willingness to want to stay at a Green Key property or any other. Actually, we're going to broaden it a bit to speak about any other sustainable certifications within the Caribbean.
Wow, fantastic. Yeah, I can't wait to see that that data. And for those properties in the Caribbean that perhaps aren't part of Green Key effort or similar licensing project that's funded, but want to do better, what are some of maybe a couple of best practices of where they could get started?
Yeah, well, so what we advocate, could I just go back and let you know that we're not just in Trinidad and Tobago. Currently, we are also assisting, we're also assisting 2 of the Marriotts in the region. Marriott International has mandated all of their Marriotts throughout the world to attain sustainability certification within a particular time frame. And we are working with 2 of the properties, one in Suriname and one in Curacao. Having said that, some of the best practices are really wrapped up in the criteria itself. So it's important for people to understand that a sustainability certification and the criteria is not just to meet it, it is also a form, a reference point, it's information, it's a guideline. Even if you're not going towards the certification, you use those points to implement best practices within your operations, so that I would hope that people would view sustainability certifications in that way. It's not just to attain it, but it's also to help you to align your operations.
Yeah.
But in the region, if I may say, from my research, I know that there's this one property that I'm totally captivated by, and this is Bukuti and Tara Resort.
Yes.
So yes, I think it's a best practice for properties to work towards. Again, I'm not sure if all properties will get to that point. And certainly because of certain restrictions tied up with resources. And we spoke about, you raised the point about what are some of the challenges. And one of the challenges really is that the Caribbean is made up mainly of micro, small, and medium hospitality enterprises. They are not widely staffed. So a lot of our interactions with stakeholders is actually the owner that is doing everything. And we hear it every single week.
Yeah.
I don't have staff.
Right.
This is very time consuming. I'm very interested, but I just don't have the time. Now, the thing is, we are very flexible, and we're an organization that is, may I say, hell-bent on progressing the cause. And so we have actually had to create a database of documents. So, with a certification, there's a lot of documentation required, like a policy and an action plan and SOPs. We have actually gone the full way of creating a drive with templates upon templates of documents. So it saves the applicant time from actually having to sit down and create. They can customize these templates, and it makes life a whole lot easier.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so let's switch over to Airbnb. I myself have a very love-hate relationship with Airbnb. In the Caribbean, I've actually had very good experiences where I've been able to stay, say, with a family, renting out, the studio next door, and I get a cultural experience. And at the same time, I know where my money's going, and it makes me very happy, and I'm in a neighborhood. You are the Airbnb host community leader for Trinidad and Tobago. And you've also written extensively about the impact of Airbnb on the Caribbean industry.
Well, so mainly Trinidad and Tobago.
For Trinidad and Tobago. So tell us a little bit about what you found there, and what your thoughts are on Airbnb there, knowing, of course, you're a volunteer as well.
Yeah, sure. And I'm also a host, right?
Are you? Oh, great. Good to know. I'll have to look you up when I go there.
So I have 10 listings in all on the site. I've been a host since 2017. So I like the fact that I'm involved on the grounds, and I'm involved academically, so I understand a bit of both worlds, right? The research that I wrote, there's an article or a chapter that was co-written by 3 other persons and myself, the impact of the Airbnb accommodation sector on the traditional accommodation sector in Trinidad and Tobago. And by and large, what we found, obviously, we did not look at the economic impact. So that's an area still to be investigated. And it's simply because of a lack of data. Airbnb is a public company, so they hold their data very close to their chest.
Yes, they do.
It's not freely available, but there's data now coming out of AirDNA, which we will explore further. But that piece of research indicated that stakeholders in Trinidad in the traditional accommodation sector, i.e. hotels, guest houses, are very open to the Airbnb concept, simply because they understand that Airbnb serves a particular type of market. Not all travelers are open to Airbnb. Another significant thing we found that business travelers tend to use, of course, the more traditional accommodation rather than Airbnb. So they were very open to the practice, as opposed to some of the more developed countries. There isn't rioting against the Airbnb concept. However, the thing that they noted is the unfair the unfairness that relates to the lack of regulations. So currently, and I can speak also to the Caribbean, Airbnb properties do not have to register as a business. So it's not registered, and as a result of that, there's no taxation applied to Airbnb businesses. Right. So those were two of the major issues that were raised. So lack of regulations and the lack of taxation. As a host myself and as part of the community, I mean, we meet and we've started to talk about the fact that eventually government will perhaps implement certain regulations for us. I could say that I don't think that the community is averse to those regulations, but certainly if there are regulations to be considered, it has to be in line with the size and the capacity of the operation. Right. Yeah. So we don't expect... we don't expect to pay room tax, for example, that is applied to a Hyatt or a Marriott. But certainly, and I would certainly hope that in deliberating over those regulations, the host community is consulted.
What I love about something that you also said recently is that it could be a great way, you know, short-term rentals can be a great way into a form of community tourism where you're really supporting a neighborhood or homeowner, helping a local save money for other purposes.
Can I share an example?
Yeah,
I'm excited to share this example.
Yes.
It's one of my clients. So my listing is actually two clients that I have, right? And it's part of a small company that I launched in 2017 called Share Home Caribbean. Understanding that persons may want to list their space, but they may not know how to. So they don't know how to organize their space. Great idea. Yeah. So I've not been really doing much but keeping these two clients, but that's another story. Anyhow, so this one client, another thing with Airbnb hosts, a lot of them are empty nesters. So children have gone out, they've left the nest and there's room in the nest for people to stay. And there's one of my clients, I call him Mr. P. He's an 80-something-year-old man who, a few years ago, I started working with him in 2018, and he lost his wife, unfortunately, to cancer. But he has a 7-room house, actually 8, but he lives in one. And he reached out to me during that time to say, hey, the vision was always for his wife and himself to have a guest house, and he wanted to list on Airbnb. I'm sharing that example because from 2018 to now, Mr. Placid is his name, he has hired persons from within the community to clean, to do maintenance work. We've even hired, it's a self-catering facility, but periodically we do engage community members to provide meals. And I am so blessed by the fact that this is someone who entered the hospitality sector informally. He had no clue prior. Now he's at the stage where he does his bookings through the telephone. I still manage his bookings on Airbnb, but he gets direct bookings. He meets and greets his guests. He does his walkthrough. He posts, and everyone loves him.
Wonderful. Yeah. But I mean, that is how Airbnb started, right? So that, to me, that's the essence of what I liked about it. And when I was in Barbados, that's the kind of local resident that I stayed with, was an old lady. She was actually a former teacher, a retired Bayesian teacher, and she had an apartment that she built, I guess, next door. It was great, and we came to a point where every day she would greet me. She couldn't wait to see where I was going. And at the time, I was doing, really on the ground kind of reporting all the time. And I remember every day I would go out to some tour or some experience, and she'd be like, "Where are you going today? What are you doing today?" And it's just having that exchange, and
Mr. Placid has a bar, so he is a bar owner as well. And so he carries his guests to his bar. And of course, his workers are also benefiting from that expenditure. So I want to just make this last point, and what you said about the elderly lady hosting you in Barbados. Airbnb, there's a place at the table for all ages. And that's what I like personally. So it's
Yeah.
it's not just for young persons to be hosts or middle-aged persons,
Yeah.
but the elderly who are just home and need some
Yeah.
sort of activity can benefit
That's a good
from
point. That's such a good point. I think tourism can be a little discriminatory when it comes to who should be part of the industry. And I think the older folks are usually left out. Even older travelers are often left out. Okay, so let's talk about this tourism rebound that we're seeing in the Caribbean to get close to our wrap up. This week, the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association shared some amazing numbers. Tourism in the Caribbean is looking at, very impressive. But aside from the arrivals, which to me is a bit of a faulty measure, but we're not going to talk about that. Aside from the arrivals, looking at some of the top concerns that their members have, that CHTA members have, at the top was labor shortage.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very sort of bottom layers is sustainability. I think that's been the case for a long time since the pandemic, unfortunately, because of the economic priorities. But now that everything has been coming back, roaring back, I mean, some islands are even way above the 2019 levels. Why is it still at the bottom? And what do you think can be done to change that? Or are we just going to continue with business as usual?
Yeah, so that problem sits within, and you said it, within a wider structural, political, and cultural context. We know that the Caribbean, as a small island developing state region, uses tourism on most of the island as their main economic earner. So it's really the focus on the economic imperatives rather than anything else. And I want to say that there has been some movement towards sustainability, but I think that when we think sustainability, it does not equal the profits and the profitability that our policymakers expect.
Exactly.
All right. So now that's because, Lily, there is a lack of research. So if we can, I mean, overall data for the region is severely lacking. I saw a post by Mala Dukara, who's a Caribbean economist, and it is a problem overall for tourism. But we don't have data to convince policymakers that sustainability is worth it economically. And so it really behoves institutions like the University of the West Indies and others to initiate research agendas that will try to get the data so that we can present the dollars and cents. Politicians only see, or they mainly see in dollars and cents. And that's the reality. Yeah. That's the reality.
But you would think that it would be obvious by now, given what we see around us. The world is changing. Maybe tourism is very vulnerable. It could disappear again tomorrow. Have another pandemic. I mean, let's not even talk about the climate change portion of it. So
can I say that I don't have the answer to solve the problem in the wider context, but what I would say is that I'm part of civil society, and I think that civil society and the role of civil society is highly underrated. Civil society groups have access to a lot of funding to implement projects. And so, for example, Green TNT is currently in a partnership with the UNDP office in Trinidad and Tobago. And we receive funding from them to certify boat tour operators in Tobago. So currently we have 3 blue flag boat tour operators. Those are the operators that take visitors out on the reef. And so we were able to bring 3 of them to certification, but this was through our partnership with a funding agency. So the point I'm saying is that I think that there's a role for civil society that could create the impact from the ground up. It did not involve directly the tourism authority. However, they have supported and they have taken notice. So that if we want this change and this shift in sustainability to happen, perhaps we need to do it from the ground up. Right. And not expect from the top down.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. We need everyone's participation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. So I want to wrap up with a little bit of your personal experience. How did you even get into sustainable tourism, or tourism and then the sustainability aspect of it? And I know that you recently went to Germany for an exchange as a visiting researcher. I cannot say the name of this university. How do you pronounce it? How do you say it?
Baden-Württemberg Cooperative State
Okay,
University.
you've definitely picked up some German.
Well, hopefully.
So tell me a little bit about your past.
Yeah, sure. My interest in tourism came when I was doing A levels, or what we call the Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Exam. I was exposed to it through my studies of geography, and I automatically just latched on to the industry. I don't know what about it drew me to it, but I knew from then that I wanted to pursue a profession in hospitality and tourism. Specifically as it relates to sustainable tourism, I really got more exposure during my master's program in tourism development and management. We did a course in sustainability. We had to go into communities and do projects and track the socioeconomic and environmental impacts of tourism. And that's where I was convinced that we can't just do tourism in the usual traditional fashion. It has to make an impact on livelihoods, and the natural environment.
The part you said about, the importance of making a positive impact on places, which is really what Tourism Lens is about, what my career, even as a travel journalist, has been about, has always been harping on that message of like, you can travel, but you can travel in a way that that makes a positive difference wherever you're going through the choices that you're making. And so what would be your message as someone who's obviously very embedded in Caribbean tourism and in Trinidad and Tobago? What is your message for visitors who are heading that way? What are some of the things that you really want them to know?
I really want them to know that the Caribbean is about people. I think what defines the Caribbean are not just beaches and the flora and fauna, but it's the people. It's our culture, it's our colorfulness, it's our vibe, it's our food. And certainly when you come to the Caribbean, explore more than a beach, explore more than a cocktail drink, but experience the people, because that's the difference. With the Caribbean, it's us.
Tenisha, it was such a pleasure to have you here. Wow, such a wealth of knowledge. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Lily.
And I look forward to meeting you in person, maybe in Trinidad, maybe somewhere at a tourism conference. I'll see you soon. And everyone, thanks for watching. And remember to subscribe to tourismlens.com, monthly newsletter going out next Sunday. Thanks, everybody.